Commander Vex-Nine tapped his six-fingered hand against the control panel, watching the latest batch of species applicants shuffle through the registration chambers of Station Nexus 7. Another day, another parade of hopeful civilizations begging for membership in the Galactic Union. How thrilling. Next, his assistant, Kretal, announced through the intercom, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone who'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. The heavy blast doors slid open with their usual mechanical groan, revealing the most unremarkable creature Vex-Nine had seen all rotation. Bipedal, sure. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. The standard template that evolution seemed to love so much across the cosmos. But this one looked soft, weak, like it might bruise if you looked at it too hard. The being stepped forward with surprising confidence, considering it was barely taller than a Zephyrian child. Its pale skin had an odd pinkish tint, and thin strands of brown fibers sprouted from its scalp. Most curious of all were its eyes, tiny blue orbs that seemed to take in everything at once. "Name and species for the record," Kretal demanded, not bothering to look up from her datapad. "Zara Mills," the creature replied, its voice smooth and oddly melodic. "Human, from the planet Earth." Vex-Nine nearly choked on his morning nutrition gel. Humans! Those mythical death-worlders that half the galaxy whispered about in taverns and trading posts? The ones who supposedly came from a planet so hostile that it rained acid and the very air tried to kill you? He looked at the small, soft creature standing before them and couldn't help but laugh. This delicate thing. From a death world? The recruiting department must be playing an elaborate prank. "Right," he said, wiping moisture from his compound eyes. "And I suppose you've come here to apply for military service? Perhaps you'd like to command our finest battleships while you're at it?" Zara tilted her head, and something flickered behind those tiny blue eyes. "Actually, yes. I'm here for the Special Forces evaluation." The laughter died in Vex-Nine's throat. Special Forces. The elite units that made seasoned warriors from across 50 systems wake up in cold sweats? He exchanged glances with Kretal, who had finally looked up from her pad with an expression of pure disbelief. "I'm sorry," Kretal said slowly, as if speaking to a particularly dim child. "Did you say Special Forces? As in, the division that requires candidates to survive in the vacuum of space for extended periods? The same Special Forces that lost 60% of their applicants last cycle to the training program alone?" "That's the one," Zara confirmed, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Vex-Nine felt a migraine forming between his antennae. First, the coffee synthesizer had broken that morning. Then, 3 separate incidents in the docking bay had required his personal intervention. And now, this dash. A creature that looked like it should be grazing in someone's garden was claiming to be from Earth and wanting to join the most elite fighting force in known space. "Fine," he said, rising from his chair with all the enthusiasm of someone scheduling their own execution. "Let's get this over with. Standard security protocols apply. Kretal, initiate the weapon scan." The security chamber hummed to life, arrays of sensors extending from hidden panels in the walls. These scanners could detect everything from plasma rifles to molecular bombs, from psychic amplifiers to quantum disruptors. They'd even caught a Glibberan spy who'd tried to smuggle in a weaponized thinking cap last month. Zara stepped into the scanning field without hesitation, raising her arms as the energy beams washed over her small frame. The displays lit up with readings, electromagnetic signatures bouncing across the screens in patterns that Vex-Nine had memorized over 3 decades of service. Then something strange happened. The weapons scanner beeped once, twice, then fell silent. "Huh?" Kretal muttered, tapping her console. "That's odd." "What's odd?" Vex-Nine asked, though he was already getting that familiar sinking feeling in his stomach. "The scanner isn't detecting any weapons," she replied, frowning at her readouts. "But it's also not giving her a clean pass. It keeps cycling through the analysis protocols like it's confused about something." Vex-Nine peered over her shoulder at the display. The weapon signature chart was indeed cycling through its standard detection patterns, but every few seconds it would pause, run a deeper scan, then start over again. It was like watching a computer have an existential crisis. "Maybe there's a malfunction," he suggested hopefully. "I ran full diagnostics this morning," Kretal replied. "Everything checked out perfectly. It identified that concealed plasma knife in the Krellian applicant's boot just fine 2 hours ago." They both looked at Zara, who stood patiently in the scanning field with that same enigmatic smile. She hadn't moved, hadn't shown any signs of concern about the delay. If anything, she looked slightly amused. "Run it again," Vex-Nine ordered. The scanners cycled through their routine once more. Same result, lots of confused beeping. No weapons detected, but no clean bill of health either. It was as if the machine couldn't quite figure out what it was looking at. "Okay, forget the weapons scan for now," Vex-Nine said, rubbing his temples. "Let's move to biological monitoring. At least that's straightforward." Oh, how wrong he was. The bioscanner activated with its usual cheerful chirp, immediately beginning to map Zara's basic life signs: heart rate, brain activity, cellular metabolism, bone density, all standard measurements that they used to establish baseline health parameters for new species. The heart rate monitor flickered to life first, displaying a neat sine wave that indicated nothing. Absolutely nothing. "Kretal," Vex-Nine said slowly, "why is the cardiac monitor showing a flat line?" His assistant was already frantically checking connections, running diagnostic subroutines, and generally behaving like someone whose equipment had just told her that gravity wasn't working anymore. "I don't know," she exclaimed, her voice climbing several octaves. "The scanner is operational. All systems are green, but it's reading 0 cardiac activity from the subject." They both stared at Zara, who continued to stand there looking very much alive, and not at all like someone whose heart had stopped beating. In fact, she appeared to be suppressing laughter. "Are you feeling all right?" Vex-Nine asked hesitantly. "Never better," Zara replied cheerfully. "Though I have to say, your equipment seems to be having some difficulties." "Some difficulties?" Kretal squawked. "Our scanners are indicating that you're clinically dead. Your heart isn't showing up on any of our monitors." "How strange," Zara said, and there was definitely amusement dancing in those blue eyes now. "Maybe you should check your calibration." Vex-Nine felt his own heart skip a beat, both of them, which at least the monitors would register properly. There was something deeply unsettling about the human's casual attitude toward what should have been a medical emergency. "Run a full-spectrum analysis," he ordered. "Everything we've got. I want to know what's going on here." The bioscanner shifted into high gear, deploying every sensor array available. Thermal imaging, electromagnetic field detection, quantum resonance mapping, molecular composition analysis. The works. If Zara Mills was hiding something, they were going to find it. The results were problematic. "Commander," Kretal whispered, her voice hollow with disbelief. "You need to see this." Vex-Nine looked at the displays and felt his world tilt sideways. The thermal imaging showed a human-shaped heat signature, but the temperature readings were all wrong. Too high in some places, too low in others, with strange patterns that didn't match any known biological system. The electromagnetic readings were even worse. Instead of the steady bioelectric field that every living creature generated, Zara was producing a chaotic storm of energy patterns that made the sensors struggle to maintain coherent readings. But it was the molecular analysis that really made Vex-Nine's brain start to hurt. The scanner kept insisting that significant portions of Zara's body weren't made of biological matter at all. Not synthetic replacements like cybernetic implants. Those would show up clearly. This was something else entirely, something that registered as neither organic nor artificial, but somehow both at once. "What in the seven hells are you?" he breathed. Zara's smile widened, revealing teeth that were perhaps a bit too white and too sharp to be entirely natural. "I'm human," she said simply. "Just like I told you. Humans don't scramble our most advanced scanning equipment by existing." "Don't they?" Zara asked, tilting her head like a curious predator studying its prey. "How many humans have you actually scanned before today?" The question hit Vex-Nine like a cold vacuum breach. The answer was zero, of course. Humans were legendary, mythical, spoken of in whispers and wild stories. Most species in the Galactic Union weren't even sure they actually existed. But here was one, standing in his security chamber, making his million-credit scanning array have what appeared to be a complete nervous breakdown. "Let me ask you something, Commander," Zara continued, her voice taking on a conversational tone that somehow made the hair on Vex-Nine's neck stand up. "What exactly do your databases say about human physiology?" Vex-Nine found himself accessing the species files almost involuntarily. The human entry was sparse, compiled mostly from second-hand accounts and unverified reports. Bipedal mammals, carbon-based life forms, standard cardiovascular system, average lifespan of roughly 80 standard cycles. All perfectly normal. All completely at odds with what he was seeing. "The files say you should have a 4-chambered heart," he said slowly. "Single-core brain structure. Calcium phosphate skeletal system. Standard organic chemistry." Zara hummed thoughtfully. "And what if I told you that those files might be just a tiny bit incomplete?" Before Vex-Nine could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in angry red strokes, as automated announcements echoed through the corridors. "Alert! Alert! Unknown energy signature detected in Security Base 7. All personnel evacuate immediately." Kretal was already moving toward the emergency controls, but Zara held up one small hand. "That won't be necessary," she said calmly. The alarms cut off abruptly. The emergency lights returned to normal. Even the ever-present hum of the station's life support systems seemed to quiet, as if the entire facility was holding its breath. "How did you—" Vex-Nine started to ask, then stopped. Because looking at Zara Mills now, really looking at her, he was starting to notice things that his mind had somehow glossed over before. The way she stood was wrong. Too balanced, too ready, like a coiled spring waiting to be released. Her breathing was too measured, too controlled. And those eyes, he'd initially dismissed them as merely unusual, but now he could see they were tracking everything in the room simultaneously, processing information at a rate that should have been impossible for organic neural tissue. "What are you really?" he whispered. Zara's smile turned predatory. "I told you already. I'm human. We just haven't been entirely honest about what that means." She took a step forward, and every combat instinct Vex-Nine had developed over 30 years of military service started screaming at him to run. Not fight. Run. This small, soft-looking creature triggered every single one of his prey responses simultaneously. "You see?" Zara continued, her voice remaining conversational even as the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "When your species first started making contact with other worlds, you developed certain assumptions about biological compatibility. You assumed that life in the galaxy would follow predictable patterns. Similar environments would produce similar evolution. Similar challenges would result in similar solutions." She paused, studying Vex-Nine's expression with those unnaturally blue eyes. "But Earth," she said softly, "was never similar to anything else." The bioscanners, which had been cycling through increasingly frantic diagnostic routines, suddenly went completely silent. Every screen in the chamber displayed the same message. "Analysis complete. Classification unknown." "What happened to your world?" Kretal asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zara's laugh was like ice cracking. "Happened to it? Nothing happened to it. Earth is exactly what it's always been. A planet that tries to kill everything living on it. Every single day. In every way imaginable." She gestured to the silent scanners around them. "Your equipment is designed to analyze life forms that evolved in reasonable environments. Stable climates, predictable seasons, manageable radiation levels. Worlds where evolution could afford to be gentle." Another step forward. Vex-Nine found himself backing up without consciously deciding to move. "But humans evolved in a place where the weather could kill you. The animals could kill you. The plants could kill you. And sometimes even the rocks could kill you. We adapted to survive in conditions that would sterilize most of your home worlds." The lights in the chamber flickered, and Vex-Nine realized, with growing horror, that it wasn't a power fluctuation. Zara was somehow affecting the electrical systems just by being there. "The question isn't why your scanners can't read me properly," she said, her voice carrying an edge that made his chitin crawl. "The question is why you thought they would be able to—" She stopped just arm's length away from him, close enough that he could see his own reflection in those impossible blue eyes. "So, let me ask you again. Commander Vex-Nine of the Galactic Union Defense Corps," she said, and there was something in her tone that suggested she knew far more about him than she should have. "Are you ready to discuss my application for Special Forces? Or do you need to run a few more scans first?" The chamber fell silent, except for the soft hum of air recyclers and the rapid beating of two very frightened alien hearts. Vex-Nine looked at the creature before him. This human who had walked into his station, casually broken his most advanced equipment, and somehow managed to make him feel like prey in his own territory. And, slowly, very slowly, he began to understand why the stories about Earth were always whispered. 3 hours later, Vex-Nine sat in Conference Room Delta 5, nursing his third cup of synthetic stimulant and wondering how his routine day had transformed into a diplomatic nightmare. Across from him, Zara Mills remained perfectly composed, as if casually terrifying senior military officials was just another Tuesday for her. High Admiral Korath Prime had arrived within minutes of Vex-Nine's emergency transmission, bringing with her the kind of intense focus that had earned her command of the entire sector fleet. Her crystalline exoskeleton reflected the harsh conference room lighting as she reviewed the scanner data on her personal tablet. "Let me understand this correctly," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Our most advanced security systems registered this individual as simultaneously dead and alive, organic and artificial, harmless and extremely dangerous. That's the simplified version, yes, ma'am, Vex-Nine replied, shooting a wary glance at Zara. The detailed report is considerably more disturbing. Zara seemed amused by his discomfort. She'd been sitting quietly for the past hour, occasionally sipping from a cup of water that she'd somehow convinced the food dispenser to provide despite not being programmed with human nutritional data. Perhaps, Admiral Koreth Prime suggested, with the patience of someone accustomed to dealing with impossible situations, our guest would care to explain these anomalies herself? Gladly, Zara said, setting down her cup. Though I should warn you that the explanation might be more unsettling than the mystery. She stood smoothly, moving to the large viewport that dominated one wall of the conference room. Beyond the transparent aluminum, the swirling nebula of Sector 7 painted space in shades of purple and gold. Tell me, Admiral, Zara said without turning around, what do you know about evolutionary pressure? Basic xenobiology, Koreth Prime replied cautiously. Environmental challenges drive adaptation. Species develop traits that help them survive in their specific habitats. Exactly. And what kind of environment do you think would be necessary to produce a species capable of surviving in hard vacuum? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Vex-Nine felt his secondary stomach clench as he began to grasp the implications. You'd need... He started, then stopped, his voice failing him. Go on, Zara encouraged, still gazing out at the stars. You'd need an environment where exposure to vacuum was a regular survival challenge, he finished weakly. Very good. And what about a species that could interface directly with electronic systems? What kind of world would produce that trait? Admiral Koreth Prime's tablet slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers. One where technology integration was necessary for basic survival. And a species with redundant biological systems, multiple backup organs, distributed nervous networks, regenerative capabilities that border on the impossible? The conference room had grown very quiet. Even the air recycling system seemed to have muted its usual whisper. Zara finally turned back to face them, and her expression was no longer amused. It was deadly serious. Earth didn't just try to kill us with weather and predators, she said softly. Earth tried to kill us with everything. Radiation levels that would cook most species in minutes. Atmospheric composition that shifts without warning. Tectonic activity that could split continents. And that was just the natural disasters. She began pacing slowly around the conference table, her movement unconsciously predatory. Then there were the biological threats. Viruses that could rewrite genetic code. Bacteria that could dissolve metal. Plants that could think and coordinate attacks. Animals that had evolved specifically to hunt other intelligent species. Vex-Nine found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. That's impossible. No world could be that hostile and still support intelligent life. Zara's smile returned, but there was no warmth in it whatsoever. You're right. No world could support intelligent life under those conditions, so we stopped being just intelligent life. She tapped the conference table with one finger, and every electronic device in the room flickered in response. We integrated with our technology because we had to. Our machines were dying just as fast as we were, so we merged with them. Organic and artificial, working together to survive. Another tap, and the lights dimmed before returning to normal. We developed redundant biological systems because single points of failure meant extinction. Heart stops? Good thing you have 3 more. Brain gets damaged? Lucky you have distributed processing nodes throughout your nervous system. She leaned forward, placing both hands flat on the table surface. The metal beneath her palms began to show a faint blue glow. And we learned to manipulate energy directly, because sometimes the difference between life and death was being able to restart your own heart or jumpstart a failing life support system. Admiral Korath Prime was staring at the glowing handprints with the expression of someone watching their understanding of reality crumble in real time. "How many of you are there?" she whispered. "On Earth? About 12 billion last count. But we've been expanding our presence throughout this region of space for the past few centuries." The number hit the room like a physical blow. 12 billion individuals, each one apparently capable of casually overriding advanced technology and surviving in conditions that would eliminate most known species. "The trader ships," Vex-Nine said suddenly, pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. "The merchant vessels that sometimes show up in remote systems with goods nobody can explain. The salvage crews that work in areas too dangerous for anyone else. The mercenary units that never take casualties," Admiral Korath Prime added, her voice hollow. "The explorers who map regions of space that kill survey teams from every other species." Zara nodded approvingly. "You're beginning to understand. Humanity has been operating on the edges of your civilization for quite some time. We've been watching, learning, deciding whether you were worth making contact with." "And?" Vex-Nine asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. "The jury's still out," Zara admitted. "Some of my people think you're too fragile to be reliable allies. Others believe you show potential, given proper guidance and protection." She straightened up, and the blue glow faded from her hands. "That's why I'm here. To evaluate your military capabilities and determine whether the Galactic Union represents a strategic asset or a liability in the conflicts to come." "Conflicts?" Admiral Korath Prime demanded. "What conflicts?" Zara's expression grew grim. "You don't actually think humans are the only Death World species in the galaxy, do you?" The question sent ice water through Vex-Nine's veins. If there were others like humanity out there, species adapted to survive impossible conditions, integrated with their technology, capable of things that broke the rules of known science. "How many others?" he asked. "Enough," Zara replied cryptically. "And some of them aren't nearly as interested in peaceful coexistence as we are." She moved back to the viewport, her reflection ghost-like against the stellar backdrop. "There's a wave coming, Admiral. A convergence of species that have spent millions of years adapting to the harshest environments the universe could provide. Some want to find their place among the stars. Others want to burn everything that isn't like them. And humans? We want to survive. Same as always. But we've learned that sometimes survival requires cooperation." She turned back to face them one final time, and Vex-Nine could see something in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before. Not predation or amusement or even confidence. It was hope, fragile and carefully guarded. "Your species shows promise," she continued. "You've built something impressive here. Multiple civilizations working together, sharing technology and resources, resolving conflicts through dialogue rather than destruction. It's admirable." Admiral Korath Prime leaned forward. But it's also incredibly vulnerable. Your unity is your strength, but it's also a weakness. You've grown soft, comfortable. When the real predators arrive, you won't be ready." So, what are you proposing? Zara Mills smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. An exchange program. Your best soldiers train with ours. Your scientists work with our engineers. Your diplomats learn from our survival specialists. In return, we help. You prepare for what's coming. She paused, letting the offer sink in. Think of it as evolution in action. You provide the civilization worth protecting. We provide the tools to protect it. The conference room fell silent as the two Galactic Union officers contemplated the choice before them. Accept humanity's offer and potentially transform their entire understanding of warfare and survival. Refuse it and face the coming storm with weapons and tactics designed for civilized conflicts against civilized opponents. Admiral Korath Prime was the first to speak. Your Special Forces application, she said slowly. It wasn't really an application, was it? More of an entrance exam, Zara admitted. For you, not for me. And did we pass? Zara Mills, human representative of a species that had transformed itself to survive the unsurvivable, looked out at the stars where other Death World species were stirring in the darkness. You're still alive, she said simply. That's always a good start. 3 months later, the first joint Human Galactic Union training exercise would begin on a carefully chosen world that was only barely habitable. 6 months after that, those same trainees would face their first encounter with a species that considered vacuum exposure a recreational activity. But that's another story entirely. As Zara Mills walked out of Conference Room Delta 5, her mission complete, and her report already being transmitted to Earth through channels that the Galactic Union's best cryptographers would never detect, she allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. After all, evolution was rarely a gentle process, but sometimes, with the right pressure applied at the right moment, it could produce something beautiful. Even in the dark between the stars, hope had a way of finding the light.